I will note that all members of the ZBA are present. Mr. Forster, Mr. Burrow, Mr. Pratt, Mr. Bothy, Mr. Hughes, Mr. Meyer. The fine zoning officer, Steve Duffy, is present, as is the counterpart, Mr. State's attorney. Petitioner, Elvina Solar LLC, is here, vice attorney Ms. Kennedy, and some of its employees. A number of Lee County support staff are present. Our court reporter is present, as are a number of interested parties. I say and continue to say all attendees are wearing masks and are trying their best to maintain social distancing at 6 feet. For those of you who may be trying to get onto Zoom, either tonight or at any of the recessed sessions to come, I'd like to reread that this is a continuing meeting, so the meeting ID remains the same on the Zoom platform, 915-3923-9154, as does the password remain the same, 209840. Want to watch, but and on Zoom you can participate in the proceedings. Not only can you see and hear what's going on, you can when it's time, when it's the phase. You can ask cross-examination questions, you can testify yourself, and you can make public comment. If you want to merely observe the proceedings, you are unable to participate in them, but you can go to YouTube, www.youtube.com, type in Lee County IL, Zoning Board of Appeals, find the correct date, and you will be able to watch the proceedings. I also know that in YouTube, the proceedings are saved for a certain length of time, and I have no idea how long each one is saved. That's up to YouTube. All right, when we left off, we thought the evidence had been concluded. However, the first thing is an accommodation to a person I ran into on the elevator coming up this evening, who was very just politely telling me she wanted she was going to make a public comment, and went on to describe part of her public comment. And I had a short conversation with her and said, I think that's much more appropriate that you testify first so you can be cross-examined, and then if you want to have a public comment thereafter, you're entitled to do that. Like I've been trying to, I hope I've been trying to send the message all along. While there's an interest in keeping the proceedings moving, I certainly, within reason, want to give everyone their chance to have their say whether it's under oath. And so that's the lady in the back of the yellow shirt. Why don't you come on up and I'll put you under oath or affirmation. And tonight we have this table set aside, the one right across from the court reporter. You want to stand anywhere you want. I'll put you under oath. Okay. You solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
There's a handout?
No, you have a seat at the table first. We'll get you started and then. Great, thank you. I'll help you get started. State your name.
Mary Jo Zink.
Kind of fast. Mary Jo
Zink.
Zink, okay. And where do you live? I don't.
I'm from
First,
I'm from Sublette.
okay, from Sublette. And do you farm outside of Sublette?
My home farm where I grew up borders some of the solar.
Oh, okay, very good. And I understand you have a handout you want to make, and I'm going to mark that, everybody, interested parties, number 2. I would like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 of them, and you can pass up. That's one pack of quiz for you, Ms. Tammy. Sure, appreciate the help. You hand me the 9, unless you want to save one for yourself.
Okay, thank you.
If you want to, if you want one for yourself, make sure you keep one for yourself. Thanks. Go ahead and hand them out. Yeah, I thought that's what you wanted to do, but No, I've got the 90. I assume she wanted the others just for folks in the audience. First, you can hand those up here. There's one short, but that's because you only got 5 finding facts. Duffy for you. Kelly. No, those are for the board. That's for you.
Okay, these are just.
Those are just for the board.
Okay.
Got the rest. Yeah. No. Oh, yeah. I'll give her mine when I'm possible. And I'm sorry, short memory. What was your first name?
Very chill.
Oh, again, but they're not, I can't.
Who's that? Okay, I'll keep up and get started, Ms. Zink, and then you can take it from there. You handed out what I marked IP number 2, being interested parties exhibit number 2. It appears to be a satellite map. First of all, from where did you get that?
Yes, sadly.
Thank you. And it is labeled in the sort of the middle. Our farm, 95 acres. Who is our farm?
That would be my sister, her husband, and my husband's farm.
Okay. And it's depicted in a lighter color, is that right? Or is it a
Yes, I believe it's the lighter colors, yes.
or is it a quarter section?
No, it's the lighter colors.
Okay.
So here's another, across the creek, there's another 45, but that's just the way it comes out on the GIS.
Okay, okay, great.
And
All right.
the solar farm is also to the left side of my 95 acres. I just didn't tag that because I'm talking basically about these solar acres right behind the 95.
Okay, you take it from there and stick to facts and tell the board what you want.
Best of my knowledge from what I've experienced in 40 years of farming this land. Hello, my name is Mary Jo Zink. Some of you might know me better as Mary Jo Brasky, daughter of Joe and Ethel Brasky, lifelong farmers in South Dixon area. My father farmed the 95-acre field that is bordered by the field designated area to be of a solar farm for over 30 years. You can see from the handout the piece of land I'm talking about. From 1985 to currently, my husband, son, and myself has farmed this land for another 40 years. We have 70 years plus knowledge concerning the drainage and the conditions that occur when there are storms that produce flooding and runoff into our field and pasture from this fields that is going to be part of the solar farm. All the rain runs straight into our 95 acres. Sometimes when there is more than 2 to 3 inches of rain, there are huge gullies that occur. The water runs down, heading north into our pasture and dumps into the creek. To say that this is safe is unconscionable and is an incorrect assessment. First, I want to talk about soil erosion that happens. The land that is tagged to be solar farm sits a slightly higher elevation than the ground. There are several places between the 2 fields where water comes rushing out of that field into my 95 acres. My concern is that without a row crop holding the water force back just how much deeper and wider the gullies are going to be in my field. This goes without even mentioning the contamination from the toxic chemicals that could be released, or shards of glass that could be dumped in my field by the force of running water. It is not uncommon now that the gullies produced are so wide and deep, they are dangerous to maneuver in my field for the combine and the tractor pulling the auger cart. The rows in the 95-acre field run east to west to combat erosion, but most of the time that is of little help. Many times we have to harvest the field by driving up to the gully as far as we can, back up, turn around, go back to the other end, and harvest going in one direction from the east. Once we get down the east side of the gully, we go over to the west side and do the same thing. This is a time-consuming process that draws out harvesting of this field by at least 1 to 2 days extra. Farming is all about risks and rewards. We understand this happens all the time and deal with it. But the situation will be much worse by not having some type of cover crop to help with the erosion in the soil farm field. In the spring, we always have to use a blade to close up the gullies, made to some extent every year. My second concern deals with the pasture and the water source for the 15 to 20 cows we pasture in Dixon every summer. You can see there is approximately 36 acres of pasture we have, and the creek runs clear through it heading east. At least once a year, the pasture is 50% flooded, and the force of the water takes out several fences, which have to be repaired to keep our cows in. I'm concerned about glass shards and chemicals dumped into the pastures that my cows could ingest, and the quality of the water in the creek from toxins that could be in the runoff water. Not long ago, in 1 year, the pasture was flooded 5 times, so badly that fences were taken out each time. This is a lot of runoff to deal with in any given year. The creek is a water source for at least 2 close neighbors for their cows and goats, so they are affected by the runoff that starts in my pasture. Lastly, there are concerns for the wildlife that come into contact with that creek for many, many miles that it does run. We definitely are not being good caretakers of our environment if all this is not considered. Who's going to be liable and responsible for the excessive damage in my field for gullies and the contamination of water source possible for these animals? Our son is a 4th-generation farmer. That isn't a huge number, but hopefully his children might follow on in their fathers and grandfathers' footsteps. Having this land to pass down to the next generation to farm is important to us. The value of the land can certainly be harmed, but the quality of the land and the water source is an immense importance more than anything else. I hope that you hear the concerns of the people of the community.
Now's the time to stop there,
Okay.
because that's part of the speech that.
Right.
Okay. Cross-examination as to the facts. Ms. Kennedy.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Zink, are you familiar with what's known as the Agricultural Impact Mitigation Agreement?
No, I'm not, so sorry.
I have nothing further, Your Honor.
All right. Members of the ZDA, Mr. Forster. No questions. Mr. Burrow.
Is there presently any conservation work done on the neighboring farms to keep the water from?
No, I do not believe any conservation was ever done in the field above us, but every time it rains, it gushes into our field.
Thank you.
Mr. Bothy. Mr. Pratt.
No.
Mr. Hughes.
Yes, were you aware that, as part of the plan for the solar farm, there is a vegetation management?
I heard that. I just want to make sure that will happen, that it will be good enough to handle the water force that's going to be coming out of that field, because it is significant. I've seen it.
No further questions.
Mr. Meyer?
No questions.
Mr. Boonstra?
No questions, thank you.
Ms. Duffy, any questions?
No questions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
What? Ignore it. People on Zoomers, Ms. Zink, if you wait just a minute, we haven't had any questions from Zoom, but just a minute. Questions from any people on Zoom? Are they unmuted, Alice? Or have you tried to unmute them?
Be a conflict of interest anyway, if he's got partners involved in, well, maybe not this one, but.
I don't think they know they're muted.
Right, so.
Where'd that come from?
Somebody on Zoom.
Oh, I see. Zoom people, if you have a question, please either make a noise or raise your hand by going down, taking your cursor down near the bottom. You'll see an icon that says raise hand and we'll see it. If you're on audio only on your cell phone, press *9 or *9. Folks, cell phones, please. Thank you. Okay, no, thank you. Yeah. Oh, shoot. Jeez. Any members of the public have questions of Ms. Zink? Raise your hand. She can walk back up here. Okay. Rest of the members of the public, I certainly gave this, Ms. Zink and I just met by pure coincidence coming up in the elevator, and I want to give anybody else the same chance so you understand that tonight, if you were going to make a public comment that, how can I say it, sort of similar to that which Ms. Zink made, I'll give you the chance. I don't want to shut anybody off. Sure.
Ms. Zink, are you?
Wait a minute. Nobody's gonna be able to hear her. Courtney, could you hand her that microphone? It's my fault.
Are you familiar with the request for the variance along your parcel at all?
I do not believe that my parcel is included in that variance that's off to the right-hand side of that 95 acres. I don't think it, what I understood it wasn't.
Well, Mr. Answer the question is fine, but you gotta identify what you're doing, otherwise.
Right.
I was gonna try to offer the map to see,
Well, is it part of the applicant's?
out of their application.
Okay, then just say, I have page number. Don't talk low or your court can't pick it up, just don't talk. No, Mister, don't do that, Mr. Luz, you've got to, when we're making a record, you've got to identify for the record what you're calling your attention to.
I'm not sure where the variance is.
Don't do it, please,
Yeah, hold on.
that's how we get out of control.
Okay, I've got in appendix C, I have sheet C that C.100. Overall site plan,
And I'm showing that to Ms. Zink, correct?
and I'm showing that to Ms. Zink.
Now ask her a question about it.
So Ms. Zink, can you point to the property that you're?
Property is right there.
She's pointing in the upper, all I can see is the upper, very upper middle.
Yeah.
And that's the picture that I gave you.
Don't just answer questions. Now it's just answering questions.
I do not know where the variance.
Okay,
I don't have any further questions.
sure, that got a little out of,
It's not, it's so.
that was real messy. We're not gonna be able, on the record, that's not gonna be able to show anything. So you pointed in the upper middle, and that's your,
That's your property, Ms. Zink, then right there. Okay,
okay. All right,
thank you, no further questions.
sorry, I don't mean to be difficult, we when you read that little sequence on a piece of paper, you won't know anybody's talking about. So we corrected it, I hope. Okay, once again, folks, last chance to get under oath and justify the facts like Ms. Zink just did. Okay. That closes interested parties evidence. Under the board's rules, Ms. Kennedy, you have an opportunity for rebuttal.
I have one witness, Your Honor. I'd like to call Ben Adamich.
Adamich, you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give be the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Seat up here, I guess. Don't fall in. That's a little trouble. You may inquire.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Adamich, you previously testified on August 6th, 2020, is that correct?
Yes,
And I'm assuming that your qualifications that you testified to still remain tonight?
they remain the same, correct?
Now, there's a rumor going around that the company intends to place a layer of gravel underneath each of the solar panels. Is this true?
No, that is not true.
And through your discussions regarding the proposed project, have you received any letters of support for the proposed project?
We have.
And do you recall who or what?
We received a letter of support from the Amboy School District dated August 6th in support of the project.
Judge, I'm handing out, I forget what number we're at for
I'll
petitioners
tell you in a
exhibits.
minute. I think I'll be able to tell you. It's at 6, P6, petitioner 6. You got one, you know, off the record. Mr. Burrow, could you do me a favor? We got an extra map there. I'd love to have Callie have that. No, we don't do that one. Okay. Back on her. Yes.
Judge, did you say this was number 6?
I did.
Thank you.
P number 6.
Mr. Adamich, I just handed you a document that I now labeled petitioner exhibit number 6. Is this that resolution that you were just discussing?
Yes.
Judge, I'd like to enter that into evidence. Now, it's my understanding that after several meetings, the company has reached an agreement with some of the interested parties. Is that correct?
Yeah, we've agreed to make some changes to the project, yes.
And why have you decided to change or modify the proposed project?
Well, as a company that owns and operates a project in Lee County and will be here for hopefully some considerable amount of time, and hopefully we'll have other renewable energy projects in the county that, you know, we'll have a presence here. We did receive a number of neighbors to our proposed Eldina project that had concerns on the project, and so in working with them on their various concerns, you know, we're willing to make some changes to the project in accordance with those concerns to address them to the best extent we can. I would say that I think there's still one or two items for us to work out on, but I think for the most part, you know, we're able to make some changes that, at least at face value, seem to be agreeable to any of the folks living nearby to the project.
And does the company intend to be bound by these modifications that you're going to list out verbally?
Yes, we do, yep.
Could you please go through them?
Sure. So we are proposing to make the following changes, mainly to our design. So starting out with fencing, we've agreed for fencing along property lines of adjacent parcels to be set back a minimum of 10 feet from the side or rear lot line. We've agreed that vegetation in the whole array area will be maintained for noxious weeds.
And Mr. Adams, I'm gonna ask you to slow down because I see people are taking notes, so if you could just slow it down a little bit to allow them time, that would be great.
Start with the vegetation.
We've agreed that we'll maintain the vegetation on the site such that noxious weeds are controlled. We have agreed to utilize a woven wire fence instead of chain link. This is also typically referred to as an agricultural woven wire fence. We've agreed to plant some visual screening buffers around a few of the residential properties adjacent to our solar project. The screening buffer will contain at least 2 rows of shrubs, 1 coniferous style shrub, and 1 more decorative style shrub, such as a cardinal dogwood, to visually break up the fence line. We are also in agreement to fund a financial surety in the form of letter of credit, cash escrow, or bond in favor of the county equal to 100% of the costs to install the vegetation until it has been sufficiently planted or established. We have agreed to ensure that our surveillance system on the site will not be intrusive on people's private property. And then we've agreed that if we do use cameras, they'll be set back 300 feet from the property line of home lots with homes on them. And then we've agreed to reinforce our adherence to the Lee County Ordinance with respect to the following sections. The glare section for solar energy systems, the noise section, and the EMF section. Further, we've agreed to adhere to the Lee County code requirements with respect to construction standards, mainly dealing with construction timing throughout the day. As well, we will abide by the Illinois Pollution Control Board standards for construction timing. And then we've been agreeable to impose setbacks to our substation from non-participating property lines. And we've also agreed to ensure no lighted lay-down areas within 500 feet of any dwelling. And then we've also agreed to shift our entrance off of Red Brick Road to be a bit further north than it is now. I don't have the exact measurements.
What road was that against? I just missed it.
Red Brick Road.
Is that all of them?
That's all that I believe we've agreed to. In principle, we're still working on nailing down a setback from residential properties. So we're working through that item still with folks.
I have nothing further.
Okay, questions this witness? Start with Mr. Boomstrom.
Thank you, Judge. You stated that the company intends on being bound to these conditions. How do you intend on being bound to them?
We're intending to be bound to them by a written agreement with, neighboring landowners that we've been dealing with and making these commitments to. Further, we'd be in agreement to have conditions placed on our permit, which is the typical course of action for something like this, from my experience.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me, Ms. Duffy.
No, thank you.
Members of the board, Mr. Forster.
No questions.
Mr. Burrow.
Earlier when you testified, I think someone had talked about the platted, old plan subdivision. Is anything in the 300-foot setback, has anything been negotiated on that or changed?
We're not proposing any changes to that at this time.
Okay.
Is it? Okay, Roti?
If there's a change in the fencing, is that's gonna be a foot off the ground or so, it's gonna be taken. So the animals can go under or what?
Gee, you gotta talk.
I heard you, but maybe they didn't.
Well, see, that's the problem. Whether you heard it or not is not the issue. That's right. It's because you. Yeah, it's pretty, you gotta be pretty close.
With the new fencing, are you gonna have it a foot off the ground or so animals can come under and be in that area?
No, we're not proposing that. Animals find their way through the fence, whether it's off the ground or not, and that would only just make us have to build the fence a bit taller if we were to raise it up off the ground. So in consultation with some of the neighboring landowners, I think we are in agreement that if we should try to keep the fence as low as can be for the National Electric Code. So to answer your question, no, we're not proposing to raise the fence off the ground.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Hughes?
No questions.
Mr. Pratt?
So, number 6 of your points that you made, you talked about funding a financial charity for the cost of the vegetation, correct?
Yes.
Explain what vegetation you're talking about.
We discussed a visual screening buffer of coniferous and decorative shrubs. And the financial guarantee or surety would be for the establishment to simply guarantee the establishment of that buffer that we're committed to doing.
So it's not the vegetation of the whole property, the grass under the,
No, the intent was to be specific to the landscaping screening buffer.
okay, no further questions.
Thank you. I'll hand it over to Mr. Meyer.
No questions.
Okay, interested parties, we don't have a runner, but I guess Bruins are volunteers. Excuse me. Yeah, well, state your name before you ask the question, please.
Nick Popovich.
Thanks. What's your question?
Can I get a copy of the changes and considerations you will be making?
The transcript is available every, I think every second day after a hearing on the website.
Thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Adamich, could you, I believe it was about the first point that you made was fencing along property lines other than adjacent, or all other adjacent parcels shall be set back a minimum of 10 feet from the side or rear lot line. Could you describe a little more clearly what that means?
It means we've agreed to have a setback to our fencing from adjacent parcels for that distance specified.
Would those be parcels that would be being used more for like ag, like tillable ground? Is that what that means?
It would be the side and rear yard. We're working on other setbacks, as you are aware, that we've discussed, to try to apply to specific, to residential lots specifically. So the intent of my statement wasn't to imply that I think we've reached an agreement on a setback that can be appropriate from the residential lot lines. I think what my statement was more pertinent to the project as a whole. But I think as stated, we're still working on the setback from residential lot lines.
Residential being like ag 1 residential lot lines versus R1 residential lot lines, like as an example.
Could you clarify that? Sorry.
I'm trying to ask for better clarity to delineate between the ag 1 and R1 residential lots versus the rest of the property that would be on the fence line. Does this statement here, the 10 feet setback, this is in reference to non-residential lots, correct?
It's to all adjacent parcels.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, let me know.
Yeah, thank you.
Is it true that all adjacent parcels will have at least 10, the fence will have be set back at least 10 feet from their property line?
Yes.
And that you are negotiating with R1 owners for perhaps more of a setback, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Yep.
And ag 1 setbacks, ag 1 and R1. These residents live on ag 1 zoned property, and we're still negotiating.
Yeah, our residential lots with residences on them, I guess. Yep.
Not trying to make sure it's clear. I think I got it clear.
I can't hear you, I'm sorry.
I hope it's cleared up.
That's a comment. Do you have any questions, more questions?
I think it's okay.
Okay. Other questions of this witness? Okay, I saw the gentleman in green first. Yeah, probably look in that direction, but
Lonnie Bright, Aldina. So did you make a presentation to the Amboy school districts, the board or superintendents of the schools in showing them the proposal and proposed solar system?
I don't believe we made a full presentation. No.
What kind of presentation did you give?
if you don't know, just say.
I don't know. I don't know.
I don't want answers
presentation
coming
we
from
gave.
someplace other than you for obvious reasons.
Sorry?
I told him I don't want answers coming from someone other than him for obvious reasons.
Do you believe that the proposal that you have that showed the amount of taxes that would be going into the Amboy schools, do you think that they're aware of those type of funds?
Yes.
Okay. In other words, they know about the monetary value that this is bringing to their school system, correct?
Yes, that's typically why school districts support most of the stuff we're doing. Yep, that's correct.
And what percentage of those residents are going to be living next to these farms in this solar system area? And I'm talking within 1,000 feet.
I don't know.
So you talk about making changes to the different parts of your application in ways of the EMP, the glare, stuff like that. When residents do have a question regarding those things, what type of mitigation are you putting in place to address their concerns and to be able to come in front of an impartial person and get a ruling as to whether it's justified or not? Is there any system that you're putting in place to allow people to say, hey, this particular area is causing too much of a glare in my house and I need some help with it? Is there anything that you're doing and putting in place to help those people?
To clarify the first part of your question, what we agreed to was what's spelled out in the ordinance with respect to requirements on us for some of those measures you mentioned. On the second, the rules of the Lee County ordinance and what conditions are placed on us in our permit. There are complaint procedures spelled out in the Lee County ordinance that typically I don't know them word for word like I know the solar ordinance, but typically they have a complaint resolution process whereby if you believe we're out of compliance with their ordinance or our permit, you're able to complain to the zoning administrator, for instance, in most counties. And again, I'm not speaking word for word to the Lee County ordinance. Might be a good question for them, but they would have enforcement over their permit, essentially allowing us to, as a land use permit that we're seeking, and then also building permits and such for the project. So I'm pretty sure they have maybe it's more of a question for the county. I don't mean to be answering on their behalf, but there are complaint processes and procedures in place with the county if you have issues with how we're complying with the rules. So
in the actual zoning board of appeals application that you put in here, you said you don't anticipate additional or adverse glare. How does the zoning board protect us as far as that goes?
I think that question is pointed at the zoning board, but I will tell you in the solar ordinance, there is a specific rule with respect to glare of solar systems on adjacent properties and mitigative measures to address concerns and issues if they arise. I would say that on behalf of, obviously our project, but there are rules, and it sounds like you have questions for the county, but I'm aware of said rules because we've got to comply with them right? And so, I would point you in that direction. I would say too that the type of solar technology that we're proposing is photovoltaic. So the point of it is to absorb as much sunlight, incoming sunlight as possible. There is a type of technology out there where glare is kind of a concern that utilizes mirrors. It's called concentrated solar power. And so that uses mirrors, to focus light at either a single point or a single area to heat water, then to produce steam to spin a turbine. And with mirrors, obviously, you have those types of concerns with what we're proposing. It's not typically, really a concern, but should there be any issues, complaint resolution and rules placed upon us to ensure that that doesn't happen. And even if it does, steps spelled out in the ordinance that we've got to do, to fix any issues if they should come up. So yeah, that's a good question.
No further questions, Chair.
Thank you. Next person, hand raised, make it easy on D. Back, right, blue shirt.
Hi, Brian Blackburn. You mentioned that you changed the fencing around the perimeter from a chain link to a woven fence. Twofold question. Why was the change made? Is it aesthetic reasons?
Just ask, you can only ask one question at a time. Answer one question.
Okay.
What's the question?
Why was the change made?
Aesthetic reasons.
Okay.
Give me the answer.
Is there a difference between the two types of fence when it comes to snow drifting?
Not that I've seen personally. I'd imagine they behave about the same way.
Okay, that's all I have.
Thank you. Next question. Make it easy on D, middle, purple shirt. Klaus.
When you talk about being bound to these conditions, can you explain to me how those carry over in circumstances where these projects are built and then sold to another company? Would things be transferred, all of these sort of
That's two
conditions that we're
questions.
making?
That's two questions, just one at a time.
Are the conditions transferred to companies when it is sold to them?
Yeah, I think, again, that's a question for the county, but yes is the answer. The permits run with the land. So essentially since the project's placed upon the property, permit runs with the property, and any owner, whether it's Geronimo or whoever down the line, has to abide by the conditions of the permit and the rules of the Lake County ordinance to maintain that permit.
Then my other question, you mentioned that you have agreed to setbacks of the substation. Can you tell us more details about what you've agreed to for that?
Yeah, we're agreeing to setbacks from non-participating property lines, a minimum of 2 foot for every 1 foot of height of the structure. Again, this would be applicable to structures that are owned by the project. Commonwealth Edison currently owns infrastructure there that does not meet that requirement. So by no intention are we making commitments on behalf of ComEd.
Would you repeat that?
We are not making commitments on behalf of Commonwealth Edison.
Okay, no. Sorry, okay. I got it. I'll ask the question. What are the setbacks from the substation?
Specifically, we are agreeing to, from non-participating property lines, a minimum of 2 feet setback from their property line for every foot of height of whatever structure. So for instance, if a structure was 30 feet tall, we would be set back 60 foot from that property line. I just wanted to clarify for an example.
Okay. Thank you. Other questions? On the left.
Marilyn Shippert, Rural Dixon. You've changed the fencing. Is it still going to have the barbed wire on top of this new fencing?
Yes,
How many strands?
3.
Thank you.
Anybody else, questions? Oh, now we got back right, orange, I think orange glove.
Will this woven wire fence be around the entire parcel or just around the residence portion?
The intent is it will be the project fence for the solar project area, the solar array area will utilize the woven wire fence.
Would you like, I'm sorry, I didn't ask your name.
Oh, Martha Johansson.
Thank you. Other questions, last chance. Oh, sorry, didn't see it.
My name is James Richard. I wonder if any consideration has been given to when and if construction begins. That South Eldina Road is a school bus route. As far as traffic control as with the semis, but there'll be a confrontation there. We know the school bus is going to lose. So has any kind of traffic control been thought of there?
It depends on the road during our construction, what the rules are on the road. The Lee County Ordinance requires that we enter into a road use agreement prior to construction with I think the county and the applicable jurisdictional Haven Township are parties to that. So that would likely be, something like that would likely be handled in our road use agreement. So I'm not sure the particulars of any specific traffic measures that we would take. I think that'd be more of a question for some of our construction guys, but we have in the past, and we're obligated by ordinance to work through that type of stuff with the township and the county.
Any other questions? Mr. Richards, any other questions? Apparently not. Yes. Oh, you're on the right, the sweater above.
Would you please tell us what the panel height is when they're down, and then the maximum height that they go up to catch the sun?
Before you answer, can I have your name, please?
Judy Gussie, Dixon.
So what is the height of the solar modules or the structure when, I'll clarify your question, in stow position when they're at about 180 degrees from the ground to the flat, and I can't ask you a question, but then what is the height, the max height of the solar module when it's at its max tilt angle, essentially is what I garnered from your question. For the first part, the Lee County Ordinance stipulates that we must be no higher than 30 feet with that infrastructure. We're proposing something considerably lower. Depending on the grade or topography, typically at stow position, modules are anywhere from 9 to 12 feet off the ground. And then at their max tilt, we're typically somewhere between 15 to 17 feet, depending on the topography. So well within the requirement there for the module height.
Any other questions? Other questions you have of him? Do you have any other questions of him? You just asked questions. Yes, oh yeah.
No, I'm good.
Okay, gotta tell me, I don't know if you're done. Over here, Mr. Tuffy in the second row, yes.
Thank you. Jerry Briddick, Amboy. Did you not previously state at another time you were on the stand that the height of the panels or the posts they would be put on was going to be 4 feet?
4 feet tall? No, I did not say
Yes.
that.
then would have been someone else from your company. So you're saying now that they could be, when they're flat, they could possibly be 9 feet tall? And flip up to, when they're rotating with the sun, the top of them, when they're slanted, could be up to 17 feet tall?
That's what I just said, yes.
That's what I mean, I'm clarifying, yes. Okay, thank you.
Other questions from people in the room? Ms. Duffy, is there anybody in the old jury room? Okay. Okay, Zoomers, questions? Thank you, Ms. Duffy, as always.
No hands are raised.
Folks, I'll give you a few seconds to raise a hand on Zoom. Once again, I'll say run your cursor over if you're on video, run your cursor over the bottom of the screen, you'll see an icon that says raise hand, click it. If you're on audio only, like your cell phone, or you don't want to be seen, press star 9. Okay. Very good. I think I went through everyone that time. You may step down.
I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Okay. Folks, the applicant, through Ms. Kennedy, has produced what we call rebuttal evidence. That means that other folks have the opportunity for what's called surrebuttal. Let me try and explain the best I can what that means. That means you can produce evidence regarding the things that Mr. Adams just testified about. In other words, it's like a funnel. Original testimony, anything relevant to the subject, and then when there's rebuttal testimony, it narrows down to just the subjects he talked about, and the folks in the room have the opportunity to produce evidence that addresses the things he just talked about. So I'm going to let you digest that for a minute. It's a little early for a break, but I think it's only fair. So let's take 10 minutes and gather back at 10 I wondered if that was what it was. Cool. Get him. You're Batwoman. We've had two interviews. I've got one and released
Yeah, I saw her go out and I was like, what? Yeah, and I was like, what, and I saw her shut the door quick and they grabbed the person, yeah, and they went out there and I'm like, there's something going back and forth.
I got it. Cut down a bunch of cotton.
Oh, there he goes. He's back in, so he must have got it.
Whole row.
He just kept going. I was like,
My aunt had one, like, she went to get up this morning, and then all this happened before, and then she's like,
But we had
no,
a bad guy coming from Oregon.
no, thank you.
And he found out. I said, and next to him, one. Because I thought, well, the lawnmower's warm and the mice are coming. Because of the gnats. He looked up and he was way up on the in front of the brush used to have over time, space around it. Don't tell my wife. When the girls were in high school and those bats got in, it was like, it was like a nuclear bomb.
So you're wanting to give that?
I have no idea what you said, so.
This was
What is it?
That's the agreement between the company and
And where, how is this generated? This wasn't the document you approached him with? Think about that.
everything he testified to.
Right.
It's gonna be on record.
In the transcript. But if he said something you don't agree with, or you want to concur with him, get under oath and testify.
I just wanted to make sure that I didn't ask the question right, but that 10 feet just meant 10 feet back from like land that is used for ag use. So.
Well, he said, I heard Joe, he said, you were saying that the setback for fencing will be at least 10 feet from all adjacent.
This was explained as all other adjacent parcels, not residential.
That's not the question I asked.
See, that's what I'm saying, like, I don't know that I cleared that up correctly, like, cause.
But I did, didn't I?
Formats for the.
Stop it. Didn't I? I asked him a question. Are you saying it's at least 10 feet of fence setback from all adjacent property lines? And he said, yeah.
It's ag.
All adjacent property.
There's no agreement to that though, as far as it went to residential property.
I asked all adjacent property. And he said, yeah. I heard it.
But there hasn't been an agreement on the separate.
Well, he just made it part of the, he just set himself in stone.
Other parcels that are not residential. There's an agreement for 10 foot setback. There's not an agreement is the setback from the residential.
He's saying it's covered by law.
That's my point, is this is separated, so no fencing on residential property. There's other separated properties. The property lines of all of this resident lots, right? So the residents zone ag lot. This can setback shall apply to the side property lines with defined case in the road. Then fencing along property lines of all other adjacent parcels, meaning not those.
So you're saying 300 feet.
That's what I'm saying, that's what, that is not going to read on there, is that part of it.
Well, aren't we talking about two different things?
You see the separation?
I do, but right now he's saying everything is tight.
No, that's not what's in it.
That's what he said. Yes, it is.
That's not what you're saying.
That's what I'm saying. He was trying to get differentiation.
Are you telling me, we're talking about fence setback, we're not talking about project setback from property lines.
Residential house, and these are actually ag one houses because they're in a rural community, so it's like R1. That's really
Right,
that setback from the dwelling property is not really agreed upon. It's not like it's 10 feet as reference to. Like, did we bring clarity to that?
No, because if it isn't agreed on, there's no clarity to decide. I mean, I'm not trying to be difficult, but if it isn't agreed on, there's no clarity to decide.
said that he's still trying to work out these setbacks.
Yes, yes, he did. Yes, he did. How you gonna pin him down to something he hasn't agreed? He's not gonna do
Yeah,
that.
no, I just wanted to make sure that we understood what the 10 feet was referencing, and that they don't know that we did that.
But I was very clear, careful to say at least 10 feet. And then he said, we're working on setbacks for residents. I understood that. But he didn't promise it.
All right. Thank you.
So anyway, bat mania reigned in my house. We haven't had it in years. I love it. Where they come into here, or give it? Well, that's right.
Your old building, false ceilings.
Yep. That's what he told me. How bad? Especially in the evening. Is that the?
There's actually two bad. That's inside. Aesthetics. So there's that. Yeah. Seriously. You can climb up the ladder.
I've seen plenty of people.
But you haven't seen them.
It's got to be the one of the highest points around.
I'm aware.
Oh, no, I was wondering. I know.
All right. Can we work our way toward our sitting places, please? everybody's back in their place. I'd love to give anybody a chance to testify in rebuttal. Raise your hand if you wish to do so. Seeing none in the room, how about Zoomers? Raise your hand, use the hand icon or the *9 on Zoom. A few seconds. Run your cursor over the bottom and look for raised hand. Okay. That then concludes the evidence. We then begin the phase that I described at the beginning of all this, and that is closing arguments or public comment. I remind everyone, including Ms. Kennedy, of course, that arguments have to be confined to the evidence that's been produced. You can't stand up and start telling the board other facts because you're not under oath and you haven't had the chance to be cross-examined. So you're telling the board what they should do and why they should do it has to be based on the evidence produced. And Ms. Kennedy, as applicant, you may proceed first.
Thank you, Judge. First and foremost, I want to thank everyone for their time during this hearing process. As you know well by now, Aldina Solar LLC is requesting the issuance of a special use permit for the construction and operation of a solar energy system and the granting of 3 variances within the project area. The first thing I'd like to do is read to you the actual preparatory language of the Lee County Ordinance on solar energy systems. It begins with, the purpose of this section is to facilitate the construction, installation, and operation of solar farms in Lee County that promote economic development and ensure the protection of the health, safety, and welfare, while also avoiding adverse impacts to important areas such as agricultural lands, endangered species habitats, conservation lands, and other sensitive lands. Moreover, the ordinance in subparagraph D provides a solar energy system shall be permitted in the Ag 1 district as a special use in accordance with the regulations and design standards set forth in the ordinance. As you well know by now, with regard to the request for the special use permit, your recommendation to the county board needs to discern whether the petitioner, through its application or during this hearing, meets the requirements set forth in the ordinance. We believe that the petition and all hearing introduced over the course of these hearings does in fact meet all the ordinance requirements. Moreover, your decision must focus on certain factors in order to be supported by a reviewing court. These 8 factors are generally referred to as the LaSalle factors. The first factor is the existing uses and zoning of nearby property. First, we believe the evidence shows that there will be little or no effect of the proposed special use on the character of the neighborhood. The character of this area is predominantly agricultural. The proposed special use will not change that. The second factor is the extent to which property values are diminished by the particular zoning restrictions. The petitioner presented evidence through Andrew Lyons from Cone Resnick, who compared other solar farms, and we believe that evidence demonstrated that the Aldina solar project will not negatively impact land values. The third factor for your consideration is the extent to which the destruction of property values of the petitioner promotes the health, safety, morals, or general welfare of the public. In this case, again, we believe that the evidence demonstrated that there will be no negative impact to property values. We also believe that there will be an increase in value to landowners who are participants in this project. You've heard testimony about the many economic benefits that the county and therefore its residents will receive in terms of the construction jobs generated. Monies to local school districts and fire protection districts within the project footprint and the real estate taxes that will be generated by the project. All of these are a significant investment in the county. There are also many indirect benefits that come along with bringing jobs to the area. The local economy will be stimulated through an increase in the amount of consumers in the area. Also, there was no evidence of any threatened or endangered species within the project footprint. The fourth factor is the relative gain to the public as compared to the hardship imposed on one individual property owner. Again, we believe that this goes to the benefits that the community as a whole will enjoy. The fifth factor is the suitability of the project for the zoned purpose. Here, the land within the proposed project is zoned as Ag 1. As you know, the Lee County Solar Ordinance allows the siting of solar energy systems in Ag 1 property. Additionally, as noted throughout the testimony, by allowing the construction and operation of a solar energy system, you are not taking the ground out of ag production, only row crop production. The sixth factor is the length of time the property has been vacant as zoned, considered in the context of land development in the area. We believe that this factor is not indicative one way or another. The seventh factor is the care with which a community has planned its land use development. Here, the county has a comprehensive plan which includes the ordinance that specifically allows for solar energy systems. And again, we believe that the proposed project meets all the requirements set forth in the ordinance. The eighth factor is the community need for the proposed use. If you look at this factor narrowly, the community being Lee County, there's a significant increase in value from the property taxes that will benefit the county. If you look at it at a state and or national basis, clean energy is something that both the state of Illinois and the United States is committed to achieving. Based on the foregoing factors and all evidence presented in this matter, we hope that you will agree that the petition meets all the requirements set forth in the ordinance, and we hope that you will recommend that the Lee County Board approve the petition for special use permit as presented with the conditions you deem appropriate. With respect to the variance requests, you've heard testimony regarding the 3 variances that the petitioner is seeking. For each of the variances, the petitioner is requesting a variance to the 300-foot setback from the platted subdivisions. According to the Illinois Municipal Code, variances are to be granted only when they are in harmony with the general purpose and intent of the regulations, and only in cases where there are practical difficulties or particular hardship in the way of carrying out the strict letter of any of those regulations relating to the use, construction, or alteration of buildings or structures or the use of land. Moreover, the municipal code provides a 3-part test that a zoning board of appeals must apply in determining whether a variance should be granted. In its consideration of the standards of practical difficulties or particular hardship, the Board of Appeals shall require evidence that the first factor is that the property in question cannot yield a reasonable return if permitted to be used only under the conditions allowed by the regulations in that zone. Here you've heard testimony regarding the practical difficulties if the variance requests are denied. The second factor is the plight of the owner due to the unique circumstances. And here, there was testimony that if the variance requests are denied, there are certain access issues that will arise for the owner of the ground. By issuing the variance, this will help the owner access the field. The third and final factor for the ZBA to consider is that the variation, if granted, will not alter the essential character of the locality. With this factor, you've heard testimony regarding the character of the ground from which the variances are sought. Each of them are undeveloped, platted subdivisions and have remained so for some time. In our opinion, and as you've heard through Andrew Lyons' testimony, the granting of the variance is not only in good harmony with the neighboring properties, but also will not alter the essential character of the same. To that end, the petitioner respectfully requests that you approve the variance request contained within the petition. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, obviously zoning board members don't get to give a closing argument, or did Ms. Duffy or Mr. Boonstra. The only 2 sets are the applicant and interested parties. So now is the opportunity for interested parties to stand up and give closing argument based on the evidence that's been heard, your opinion of what the board should or shouldn't do and why. Raise your hand. Nobody? I can't tell what, unless you raise your hand. Mind reading was not my specialty. This gentleman, the first one I saw raise his hand.
Oh.
She holds it for you.
David Gussing. I live adjacent to the proposed site. Not very often does anybody have the opportunity to really shape what a county or an area can become. You have that opportunity, if you call it that. This land has been, I farmed about 450 acres of this property at one point in time. I owned some of it until 1985. And for those of you who were in the ag industry, you know that 1985, the whole string of the 80s was a tough time. We survived. The impact that this project is going to have on Lee County, I think is not good. But I'm more concerned about what is in the future. Whether you approve this project or not, we have more projects underway, apparently. Do we want this county under glass? You made the comment, Ms. Kenny, about how it's going to improve life here in the county. I would beg to differ. I don't know how you can look out your window and say, gee whiz, that really looks good, seeing 1,288 acres of nothing but glass. Maybe, I don't know whether you want to live beside that or not.
Let's avoid making this personal and address the board, please.
Okay. But I think it's also valid. Whether it's personal or not, it is as valid as can be. It's as valid as this hearing. One other thing that has really bothered me. Geronimo has been working on this project for what? A year? 18 months? The first time we hear anything about it, not even a glimmer, was when that notice finally wound up in the mail. And quite frankly, I had to go into the post office to get it because we weren't home at the time that it was being delivered. So that was at least 3 days afterwards. And all of that was done, let's see, what was the first hearing date? 6th, 7th of August? Why? How much opposition, how much chance are we to get expert witnesses? Yes, we've got expert witnesses. We had one man who has absolutely dedicated his time to try and find something. And I think Adam has just done a fantastic job, considering we had so much time. Now, I'm going to use an illusion that you probably may not like. But there isn't a criminal walking around that isn't given more time than we had to try and figure out how to protect our residences. That's not fair. No, I don't care what way you slice it, that is not fair. And we really resent it. Because we're going to be stuck with it. The landowners get all kinds of money, the school district gets all kinds of money, the county gets all kinds of money, and shove it to the people that are adjacent to it. We could care less. Guess what? We do care. They talked about the impact on the environment and the surrounding people. This impact study, brother. We are people, we walk, you know, we got 2 legs, a brain, a few things like this. Don't tell me that we are insignificant, which is exactly what was on that report. Don't tell me that at all. So you, as members of the zoning board, you have a hell of a responsibility. And believe me, I've sat on the county board. I know what they're looking at. It's called dollars, you know, that little S with the 2 lines through it. But I think you need to make a statement. What do you want Lee County to look like in 5 years or 10? If you want it glassed over, so be it. But we'll be one strange looking county. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person want to make a closing statement, public comment? Oh, right, next one.
Randy Carlson from Dixon. I'd like to try to add a little bit for what Mary Jo was talking about with the concern in some of the area for this project. And it was mostly from the, coming from the, how we handle kind of the precedents we're setting for a special, a special project like this. We're setting the precedents here on everything we do. So the basic kind of objection to kind of the project from some of the point of view is a special use permit that may or may not have any restrictions. We need time to decide if the restrictions that would give us some control and a little bit of the basic restrictions that we would add. So there's some remediations, there's some, so that if any problems can be handled, can be set up. So conditions for reasonable use to move forward. One thought is still, is there sufficient hydrology studies and runoff? And what danger are we putting basically the 3-mile branch watershed into? In this the excessive flooding, we did have a kind of a statement from an expert that there may be as much as 1.5% or 1.5 times more water quickly coming off of this, depending on how this is handled, vegetation, et cetera. Can the 3-mile branch take that? There's just a very large drainage area into that area that could be really quickly inundate the whole watershed. And then again, is there sufficient protections without the us putting together guarantees and restrictions for things that can happen during construction, meaning contaminations or especially down the hill, I guess you could call it. So are there enough protections for surface runoff, wells and for the watershed? Is there enough damage protection? So things that we haven't really had time to study and investigate. The studies provided so far, the SWPPP and the additional studies for natural resource type studies. So do we need some more time to set up terms and conditions that could help if there are any problems? So that's what we wanted to add for kind of today for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Next. Oh, I saw a lady in the orange, or sort of one print first.
Martha Johansson, Dixon address, Amboy School District. First and foremost, I am entirely against taking good farmland out of production for a solar power plant, not a solar farm. You will remember that the crop productivity index for the proposed power plant is 118.51 something or other, which rounds to 119. The average for the county is 119. This land is the same productivity on the average that all of Lee County has. Bureau County averages about 120. 123 for DeKalb, 121 for Putnam, 111 for Whiteside. So we have quite good land here for production. Every farmer would like to have a land of 132.
Uh-oh. Technical problem.
Every farmer would like to have a CPI index of 132. There is no way that that can be on a farm of 132. This proposed plot is just as good as any average in Lee County. In fact, the northernmost section and the southernmost section is quite green, which is 135 and above. And this good productive land would be taken out of production. Even after deconstruction, this land cannot be returned to the position that it is in now. Yes, the immediate future of money for the next 20 years sounds great, but what happens after 20 years, 20 to 35? How much money is the county going to receive? How much money is the school district going to receive? This plant will be depreciated. Most of us will not be alive at the end of 35 years from now. So we don't know what's happening. Solar power plants are a new entity. We have no idea of the change to the land on the deconstruction. We need to protect our resources. There is no more land to move west like there was in the 1800s. We are now land bound. There is no new land. And we need to protect the good productive land that we have. We need to think of the productivity of this land so that we do not depend on other nations, that we need to think of our grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and they will have great-grandchildren, and they will want these resources. The setback for adjacent residences, I believe, should be at 300 feet, the same as a platted subdivision is set at 300 feet. These houses, these residences have been in existence for over 100 years, probably closer to 150 years. And they should be regarded as being like a platted piece of ground. I am very disappointed that Geronimo did not give us more time, that we received a certified letter knowing nothing that was going on. We received no maps, no information. On the first night of the hearing, we did get a proposal, but not the complete proposal. I did go in and get it on a Monday morning after the Thursday meeting, and I read through it, and many of the questions that I had said refer to Appendix C. And I looked for Appendix C, and there was none. So how can we find or think about what's happening here if we don't have the information available? Eventually, I did manage to get one of those spiral books, which has much information with nice fold-out maps that one could see, read, and understand. Every one of us, all of the adjacent landowners, should have received one of those spiral-bound books ahead of time, before the first hearing even. And one of the reasons that Geronimo gave for wanting this particular piece of property was that there are only a handful of people living adjacent to it. So we don't matter. We are just as important as anyone else. And just because they happen to choose this piece does not mean that we have rights the same as the landowner has rights. We are also landowners and deserve to have those rights too. I am concerned about the water. When the rains come, and sometimes we get a nice gentle rain, and other times it comes down in 20 minutes. Sometimes we get 1 inch, sometimes we get 3 inches. And the fields cannot handle that water. There is, on the proposal, there could be chemical control. And as I believe Dr. Heiniger said, that sometimes the power plant puts chemical kill under the panels because it's difficult for them to mow. And if these panels happen to be facing towards the east or the west during the morning, the evening, and we happen to get a quick rainstorm, that water will not have time to be absorbed into the ground, even though there is a grass covering. It will produce more runoff. Without a precise measurement on one of the maps, I would guess that about 40% of the proposed parcel is in green, which implies way above 132. And there is wetland. Berry Road was once called Lake Street. And Lake Street implies that it was rather waterlogged at times. And so therefore, this might be not conducive to putting the piers into the ground. They can move. I have here the 2019 Illinois soybean production. And Lee County had 59.7 bushels per acre, which is at the top of the production for the state of Illinois. Now, that's not the top county, but it is in the top tier of their legend here. The corn yield last year, and you will remember that last year a lot of corn got put in late, like the middle of June. And that production was down slightly to 181.4 bushels per acre. The top level is 185 bushels per acre. So it wasn't that far below the average for the state. I would urge you to deny this request. Thank you.
Thank you. Next. Middle, purple gloves.
Stacy Luz.
Would you give that name, please?
Stacy Luz,
Oh, I'm sorry.
Amboy.
Okay, go ahead.
A zoning board member asked my husband the other day, don't you think a person should be able to do whatever they want with their own property? And my husband was asked a similar question the other night by Mrs. Kennedy. I say yes, and that freedom extends until it encroaches on the freedom of others. Should this landowner have the right to take a profit off his land at the expense of everyone else that owns land near him? At our loss of quality of life, our loss of a safe environment, and our loss of property values. One of the reasons any of us chooses to live in the country rather than in town is the wide open spaces. 7-foot barbed wire fences are not part of the rural aesthetic that the families of and near Eldina live in. And certainly, having that fence around the property lines, some surrounded on 3 and 4 sides of their property, that will most definitely be a loss of quality of life. For most of us, our home is our greatest asset. There are many questions that this proposed project leaves unanswered. There are boxes that are not checked. The AMA is meant to protect the leasing landowner, not the neighboring landowners. The soil and water report that we have, it recommends additional studies in regard to wetlands and water runoff. That has not been done. A full, impartial economic impact study has not been done. And the Lee County ordinance doesn't have our back either. 15-foot setbacks, 30-foot height allowances, only $1,000 an acre required for decommissioning. In Geronimo's safety plan, it states that the workers are to seek shelter if the wind speed exceeds 39 miles per hour. Do you know how many days the wind out where we live exceeds 39 miles per hour? A lot. So am I to assume that I should keep my children inside on those days? That they can't be outside playing for fear of danger from our neighboring solar field? What about the substation that's proposed on parcel C321? What do we know about these batteries? Has anyone had time to take a good look at the batteries that will be sitting straight out from my front porch? I'm left to wonder, are they safe? Where has this size, type, and amount of batteries been used before? it wise to build this substation right on the corner there where Kilmer Road has a sharp curve? Why would we approve this? Because it's most convenient for them to tie in there? Because it saves them money? At the very least, this substation should be moved to a more appropriate location within the project, one that does not cause a threat to the safety and well-being. And parcel C 321 should be denied. As our representatives, you must do your due diligence to make sure we do this right. We all know there are thousands of more acres of solar panels in the works for our county. We must take some time to look at every unchecked box, every legitimate concern. If you don't know all the answers right now, that's all right. Our neighbors in Ogle County found themselves in a similar position a couple of years ago. Solar wanting land, questions unanswered, a special use ordinance with many holes. So they put a moratorium on solar. They put together a committee to dive into it, and they knocked out a pretty agreeable solar ordinance for their county. Do that. Why not do that? Solar isn't going anywhere. Our county has the ability to welcome solar in a way that minimizes the impact on its residents. But you must do your due diligence and do it in a responsible way.
Thank you. Anyone else? Back behind you, Mr. Boucher.
I would just like to say that.
We just,
Nick Popovich.
we just, yeah, thank you.
Nick Popovich. I would request that the board would consider the generations that this is going to affect. Your kids, their kids, their kids, potentially their kids. I mean, this is going to be there for a long time. I wouldn't think of this as like a new tire shop going up in town, you know? And this land is making money right now. I mean, the town, it'd be different if this was like going in Detroit where they're like completely broke. I mean, we have money. We're not in a position where we have to have this. And the things that she brought up that haven't really been checked into. It's with the world's growing population, do you want to feed them or do you want to give Walmart and Amazon some cheap electricity? I would just ask you to please think hard about this decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Who else got to raise their hand? Oh, over left, the front view.
My name's James Richard. I live on South Eldina Road, 1196. I'm gonna, first of all, I hate to see good farmland go to waste. When there's plenty of undeveloped land within a mile that could be developed and used, and we gain both ways. We maintain agriculture and also have solar. From a personal point of view, me and my wife, we've been at the place 35 years. We put our hearts and our money into the place. We love it. That's why we're there. That's why we bought it in the first place. We feel that our constitutional rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness have been infringed. So, we've been impacted on all four sides by this project. Agreed, we have been in some negotiations and made some progress with Geronimo. We lost a lot of sleep over this. We kind of bit at each other, in a way that we don't normally do because we're on edge. There's a whole lot of, well, not a lot, but there's a number of families that are impacted by this in the same way. And I urge the board to consider those kind of things, you know, if it was them and they were in the same position, how would they feel? Granted, it's money, but like I say, why not have both of it, both ways? We can have the farm, we can have the solar and undeveloped land, which I'm speaking of as the Green River Ordinance plant. So plenty of land available there could be used. So I guess that'd be all I have to say, I guess.
All right, thank you. Next, someone, raise your hand. Blue in the middle pew.
Hi, my name is Lisa Hall, and I'm a resident of Franklin Grove area. To be clear, I am not against solar energy. I'm against using tillable farm ground to install the infrastructure. I understand the power grid is a concern when determining a prime location. I question why not use the 2 vacant salvage yards or the Green River Industrial Park close as a crow flies. This year alone, we have approximately 10,000 tillable acres in Lee County involved in solar infrastructure projects. When will enough be enough? I understand that farming can be a challenging profession with weather, stock market prices, and operation expenses. Some may feel it is their way of helping out with a green deal in the future generations. Many of these farms are generational operations. Children and grandchildren make life choices and decide to get out of farming. I get it. Then you're approached by the solar company with their sweet deals, hard to pass up. The world is a big place with a lot of mouths to feed. Take farmland out of production, might not seem like a big deal, but it might be in 25 years, who knows? I think the zoning ordinance should be requiring landowners involved, grant permission for the Lee County Soil and Water Conservation and affiliates to perform any tests determining wetlands, etc. Immediate notice should be provided to adjacent landowners when a proposal has been submitted to the zoning board. Fencing, landscaping, setbacks should be revisited by the ordinance and zoning board. This process and the lack of timely notice has had major health effects and mental health effects on my parents. Many sleepless nights, even every waking moment thinking about their future at the invasion of the solar infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you. Someone else? Middle desk row at the end.
Jerry Riddick, adjacent landowner. First of all, I'd like to say that I am greatly disappointed that this whole thing is happening during the COVID-19 and we are not able to have all the people who would like to be of the public here listening to this. They cannot be in attendance. It seems very unfair to me. Second of all, the advertisement by the zoning committee or the appeals committee, whichever, I understand was in 2 newspapers, and also the only postings I saw after I got the letter, the certified letters, was at each end of Red Brick Road, or I shouldn't say each end, and on the south end of Red Brick Road at the intersection of Aldina Blacktop, and at the north end of Red Brick, where it adjoins Route 52. Now, we've all been under lockdown because of COVID, and supposedly per the governor, we're all supposed to be staying home. how do you expect the neighbors that are supposed to be staying home, per the governor, to be out riding around to see these posts out on a post along the road? It seems very unfair to me, which goes into the timing that Mr. Gussie and Mrs. Johansson talked about. Another thing, I know in the immediate Eldina neighborhood, approximately 30 years ago, if you were going to do something like this or something similar, you would go around and you would talk to the neighbors first and ask them if they had any problems as far as a landowner and what you were going to do. And I know that for a fact because there was a mobile home moved in on the property where I currently live. And as out of respect for the neighbors, the person purchasing and placing the mobile home went around and asked if anybody had any problem with it, because it was going to be a temporary home, so there was not going to be a foundation underneath of it. And I don't know, maybe I'm too old school, but that's the way I was raised. You got neighbors, you respect them, and you should expect that they respect you. And it all comes up in a big certified letter is the first time we hear about it. It's very unfair. Also, to me, ag zoning is for the production of soil. Production from the soil. Solar things are not with posts in the ground. That's not production from the soil. If you want to zone this, zone it commercial or zone it industrial. It has nothing to do with growing anything in the ground. Also, upon a visit by Mr. Bowen, there was 3 of us that are sitting on this side of the seats that were told that the solar panels would be about 4 foot tall. Oh, I'm sorry, 4 foot is a long ways from 9 foot. I don't appreciate the changes in that when they know they were specifically asked to give information. Could have at least come back and said, well, I was wrong or it was changed. Another thing is we've got 1,288 acres, and I know that belongs to 2 farmers. I don't begrudge anybody making money and bettering themselves. But like Mrs. Love stated, that's all well and good until you start infringing on someone else. It's just like me. I can't sit here and tell you you can't do this, but I can ask politely that you consider this and turn it down, or you at least consider it and give us constituents out here on this side more time to really figure out what's going on and to understand everything. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Back behind you is Duffy in the checker, looks black and white checker.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good evening. My name is Sue Coors. I live at 1399 Achusa Road, Dixon. I have been attending these proceedings concerning the Eldina Solar LLC and trying to keep an open mind about the effects such a project would have on the environment aspects, the physical and health of individuals around the project. While listening to Geronimo Energy representatives, I was thinking to myself, why they're marketing this to our zoning board, making it sound like everything was going to be this wonderful solar project with no ramifications to the people or environment. I think the word that was used the first evening of testimony was none. After getting to the computer that evening, after the first meeting here at the courthouse, I found documentation after documentation from such areas such as the North Carolina State University, University of Maryland College of Agriculture and Natural Resources, University of Arizona, University of Madison, Wisconsin, the Nevada Center of Excellence, and many other sites that have been, many other sites that have been studying the effects of solar energy for several years. My findings have been appalling. The information is out there for all of us to learn from. We, the citizens of Lee County, and especially our zoning board, along with the Lee County board members, need to take a look at the devastation that others have incurred by the installation and utilization of solar farms and learn from what others have experienced. Documentation is out there. Let's take an example, a simple question that was asked by Ms. Kennedy the first evening of testimony was that the sound, was there going to be a sound associated with the solar project? The answer, no. The second evening of testimony, the representative stated there would be some noise, a hum. In my readings, I have found that these motors are audible for several hundred feet away and must be constantly maintained in order to prevent the tracking system from locking and getting stuck. Once they are stuck, the tracking system will continually attempt to correct itself until the motor burns out. Since this project would have thousands of motors running when tracking the sun, the combined sum total of decibel level of noise would be much greater than a hum. Another question posed was about the rise in temperature in and around the area. The response was there would not be any rise in temperature. Yet according to the University of Maryland researchers discovered solar heat island effect is caused by large solar power plants. A question was asked if the local airport had been notified of the project, so they were aware of possible glare. The response was that there was no glare to these panels, but these panels were black. It has been noted in several articles that I have read this past week that reference Somerset, Great Britain. The British Aeronautical Association ruled that a case of a fiery plane crash was the result of a pilot being blinded by reflection of one of UK's largest solar powered facilities. Here in the United States, an Indiana farmer stated that anyone can tell you they are reflective as a lake.
This course, you just can't go into new things. I mean, you can argue about what's been produced, but it's just not fair to start talking about articles and something happened and you read this. You could have testified about it, but you can't do it now. You're not subject to cross-examination. It's just not fair.
Some of us may not be on this earth when the solar panels are decommissioned, which should be 15 to 25 years. I have not seen a plan for Lee County to deal with the dismantling of solar farms. But with that, what the cost of dismantling a solar power plant is roughly the same as the cost of installing it, which would be in the millions of dollars. And once it's dismantled, there's no place for the solar panels to be disposed of. The comment was made about a landfill. The United States has recommended not to accept solar panels because the high levels of cadmium and lead inside of them. So without the landfill to accept them, there is no process right now available to recycle them. It appears that the solar industry has tried very hard to claim that there is no toxins in solar panels. But there is cadmium telluride. Cadmium telluride is the most common doping agent used in the production of solar panels. This entire project was only brought to our attention, only brought to my attention, 1.5 to 2 weeks prior to the first meeting that was held August 6th. Public notices were only sent out 2 weeks prior to the actual meeting, and road notices were posted about the same time. There was no way the citizens of Lee County were provided adequate information nor time to formulate an appropriate response and become as prepared as Ms. Kennedy and the Geronimo marketing team were. We've tried our best in such a short period of time to ask appropriate questions, which some of us have failed miserably at, me included, and provide information concerning the negative ramifications of such a project. Currently, Lee County does not have a functioning solar farm, so it has not been faced with ramifications of problems associated with a solar farm. Thus, we need to look outside our boundaries and learn from others who have had to deal with these situations. The first comprehensive plan goal set by the Lee County Comprehensive Plan reads as follows: maintain the agriculture economy in the county by limiting non-agriculture development on prime farmland. Number 2, preserve the rural character and farming lifestyle of this county. And number 3, preserve and enhance the aesthetic quality of the county. Lee County is not going to receive electricity from Solar LLC. It's going to be linked into the national power grid and will be going to other places throughout the United States. Will we be seeing a reduction in our electric bills versus the possible adverse impact it would have on the people of Eldina and the surrounding areas, our soil, our waterways, our groundwater? How many members of the zoning board are going to be living next to this proposed project? How many board members are living next to this project? Would you like this type of project along your property line? I think that we all know the answer to this. I know you're already pretty much made up your minds and set as to how you're going to vote on this project. But just one last thought. You are thinking about all the tax money that the county would benefit from, going from $65 per acre for farmland to $1,200 per acre the moment the first bit of energy leaves the solar farm. But what if Eldina Solar LLC decides to pull out? They decide not to pay their contractors, their landowners. They don't pay the taxes as they are supposed to be paid. Then what? Taxes become the responsibility then of the landowners, who will be responsible for paying any taxes incurred. And if they do not pay, the land in project will be put up for auction. In the long run, the landowner is now out of everything. I ask that you deny this request. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next. Raise a hand. Zoomers? Well, I'm moving on to Zoomer, but I'll come back. Let me give Zoomers a chance. Now, say, Zoomers, if you want to make public comment, now is the time. Hit the raise hand icon or make some kind of motion or a noise or. I'm gonna give you about 10 more seconds and something's gotta. Alex, anything?
Nothing.
Okay. Mr. Liz.
Adam Love from Amboy, of course. I find myself at another stage of this process, not prepared. Unfortunately, there's a lot of strings to this whole process. We were given notice July 16th or 17th through the certified mail. It started for us. And I began to wonder, probably not until about 3 or 4 days later, as to what was going on. So I just got in the car and I started driving around the town, driving around the neighborhood, knocking on doors and seeing who knew what. Pretty disheartening, you know, when nobody in Eldina knows about Eldina Solar. That they're getting.
Yep.
Sorry.
Hear me now?
That's pretty good. Oh, that's not so good. Is the red light on, off the record, Tim? Down at the bottom, there's a button? Oh, well, these, wait a minute, Ms. Duffy's doing some, sorry.
Probably get more batteries.
So I think that's off the record, Kelly, we're, I think this is hard.
This is kind of what we said.
Number 11. Can you hear me now?
Very good.
Very good. So after we got the letter, took a couple of days actually to settle in, I guess, is what was going on. And then I jumped in the truck and started knocking on doors. And again, nobody in Eldina that I came across knew anything about the project. I mean, it came to be that you realize that unless you were attached to that parcel, you knew nothing about it. And it was pretty disheartening, you know. Time's clicking. And neighbors need to know so that they can be educated to come and know what impacts they might have on the land near them. When I knocked on some more doors, some more neighbors, really, they had letters from Duke Energy, 4,000 acre solar project. They had all kinds of information sent to them about that. And they had concerns. And they had no idea about Eldina Solar on the other side of them. It's hard to say the impacts that this project might have without an understanding of whether that one's going to be there or not. If both are there, a lot of these homes, we've given testimony, this doesn't help their property value. When there's 4,000 acres on one side of them and there's 1,200 acres on the other and they're pinched in the middle, they're stressed. They want to look into it. They want to get online and find out how much worry is there? How much should I have? We don't have time for that. We don't have time for that. The hearings are coming and you've got to get things figured out. You got to show up, be there. I found out through my research that the school district had already, on the very first day of the hearings, Thursday was the start of this, and the Amboy School District was going to be voting on approval of the Eldina Solar Project. How could that be? I just found out about it a week or two before. And I'm a landowner adjoining to this project. How could it be on their agenda that they ought to endorse this project? So I did some calls, checked with some people, asked for a pause, not a yes or a no, but a pause. I found out that they were being solicited back in June. They were asked for a resolution in June to endorse the Eldina Solar Project that no one knew about that lived near the residence, near the site. Back in June. It's unfortunate as you go through it, and I don't know that that justifies anything as to whether you would say yes or no, but really, this is the partner that Lee County picks. When I looked more into this, and boy, I've called so many people across this country to ask about solar, and I researched solar, and I understand it's coming. I understand that it's our tax dollars that are funding this industry. It wouldn't exist unless it was some of my dollars that they're spending on these panels. I've learned about the efficiency of solar panels. Actually, wind is something like 34%. Panels are only about 20% efficient on the land use. And talking to a concerned neighbor, he said, you know, Adam, there's a lot of farmers on the board here, and sometimes you got to change the understanding of what we're talking about here, the efficiency of the solar panels. Tell each of them that you're selling them a bag of seed that only has 20% germination rate at best. How many of them are going to buy that bag of seed and use it on that land? That's what we bought into, though. That's what we're about to do. We're going to put a bag of seed on this land that actually is only effective at doing what it was intended to do for about 20% of it. And it's a good use because more of our tax dollars went into subsidizing it to make it some sort of a profitable situation. And we look at the tax dollars that maybe the school could get. Heck, they didn't even know what they were even endorsing when they were being asked to endorse it because nobody else knew. I did some more research and I looked up our county ordinance. Thought, boy, let's get an understanding of what we're looking at here, right? More disappointment. Tremendously disappointed. This ordinance lacks all over the place. That's going to change. I'm not going to stop today. I'll make phone calls to some of you all. 15 feet away, we can have a structure that's 30 feet tall. I'm asking you to cap it. They don't need it. They've said that they don't need it. 15 to 17 feet is all they need. I actually talked to Mr. Hinkle. And there could have been maybe an error, perhaps, in the writing of that. The 30 feet for like a transmission line might be acceptable, but it doesn't make sense to me that we would ever need to have it be 30 feet. I'm asking you, if you approve it, to make an amendment there. I'm asking you for any other solar array that would have come through, that you'd be looking closely at that. I also, when I look at this ordinance, and I look at the rights of people that live in an R1 district, and they were granted 300 feet. Good amount of space. And we sit here in an Ag 1 district and we lose the rights that we thought we would have had in an Ag 1 district. As I sit on a farmette, as many of these homes are farmettes, they're not R1 when you're out in an Ag district. Even though it's a farmette and they only own the land, it's Ag 1. They lost their rights. Why? I don't believe you'd have so many people that have gone through so much stress and heartache if you'd have given them some more area around their property. We could have prevented all of this. Much of the stress of this whole proposal comes because of the encroachment of the ordinance and what it allows. We have a fence problem in this ordinance. The fence is excluded from the setbacks. Why? I don't care where the panels are. They're going to be behind the fence. Move the fence back. Even in an R1, who wants to live next to a 6-foot chain link fence with barbed wire strands across the top? It doesn't meet the aesthetic. It doesn't meet the ag community. It doesn't meet anything that I've seen in any industry other than industrial. Move it back. I'm asking you. For this or any other project that you look at, the fence needs to be moved back. I'm not prepared for this because we're trying to meet with Geronimo as residents to try to help secure things in good faith with them. And they have stepped up. We began. We're in the 10th inning though. I would have liked to have sat here and said that we have that in place. I would have liked to have seen a pause, but here we are. There's other precedents that have been set. Ogle County paused and they looked into this. They looked at their ordinance. It's not that they have they looked at it for the residents. How can we commingle this? If we have to live with solar, right? That's what we're all gonna have to figure out that we have to do. How do we deploy it correctly then to meet the aesthetic of the community? We have not met those obligations with the ordinance. Give some setbacks to where the residents live. The 300-foot setback is precedence. Put the fence at 250 feet then for non-participating residents. Brian Blackburn's back here. I'm glad to see him. I've never met him before, but I talked to him as we had heartache over. We're going to put chain link fences that are good at catching snow all around the county road line, right along the ditch. how are you guys gonna do it, getting snow out of there? I talked to Richard Humphrey, the road commissioner. I said, Richard, have you spoken up about any concerns? Do you have any concerns? Yeah, I got a lot of concerns about it. Lake Street, Berry Road, he said, Lake Street. He said the snow.
I guess that's news. Now you're testifying what somebody said.
Okay, we'll back off. The concerns of the township, as I made my phone calls, didn't seem to have been met. It's another box that's unchecked in this process. They haven't been met, and we're sitting here today in final stages. What are we doing? Why are these boxes unchecked? Why is the township not here, just like they were for the plumbers that came in to be before this hearing started? Palmyra Township seemed to have an input on that. We have a fence problem. We have neighbors that are going to be impacted from this, from 3 sides and from 4 sides. It shouldn't happen. There should have been appropriations for visual impact already. The things that we wrote up and presented to Geronimo, the county should have already had appropriations for that in the ordinance. The parcel to the north, that whole 200-acre parcel, we're asking for individual approval of each individual parcel. When you look at the Carlson family there, Mr. Heiniger testified that they're studying. They're going to get better white papers out there. The calculations aren't completely right with the runoff and what happens when it comes off of solar. There's a good part, you can look at the diagram and look at how much of that parcel is not even covered with solar panels. It's just set aside in grass. How is it effective? It's already not very effective as far as the panel efficiency, but then why is it set aside like that? It's running to the Carlson's house. It's impactful on somebody. Why approve it? There's a plan that could be approved in here, but why that parcel be part of the plan? It's not an easy position to be in for you all, and I don't envy you. Every step of research and every phone call, trying to pull the neighbors together to make sure that we're looking at every little facet. There's so many strings to this that I'm not even going to cover in my testimony because, like everything else, I wanted to give a better effort at it, and I can't because I didn't have time. There's over 70 or 80 signatures on this from residents around Eldina. Probably can't even talk about it, but they're not interested in what solar might do to their properties as far as values. Every resident that lives on this site is not a fan of that fence being right encroached around their property, and we're at the mercy of hopefully Geronimo working it out with them. And if that were to not happen, they're looking at you, their fate, to some sort of an acceptable agreement possibly would be in your hands. I hope you see that. I hope you see what the impact is on them. It's not just that people are saying no solar in my backyard. It's got real welfare impacts. It has health ramifications to them. You consider stress of trying to sell your home at the age of 80 to downsize to get to town, and it sits there on the market waiting for the right buyer, waiting, waiting. Too bad for them, I guess. We need to change the ordinance. We have an opportunity to help mitigate, if we're going to go towards solar, to make this less abrasive on the community and to lessen the stress of everyone that has to be living near this as we learn all together what the ramifications end up being. I fear we're headed towards approval of a lot of different projects around the community, and I guess we're all gonna see what that fallout might be. I'm glad for the opportunity to sit here so that as this moves forward and other projects move forward, I know that I can look back and say that at least I spoke up and I did something. I know that I went out and I drove to help get these people here to give their input as well. And I know there's many more that would have liked to have been here, but with COVID, makes it pretty tough. There was a lot of unfortunate things that happened with this particular project, and maybe you're used to that. Maybe that happens with a lot. I don't know. I wasn't involved in a lot of other things, but it's pretty heartbreaking and heart-wrenching to go through this. It's in your hands. Thank you.
Thank you. Last, anyone else? Mr. Duffy? You've had your chance, so what's up?
Well, I wanted to make kind of a summary.
No, you've done that. Everybody gets one chance. Okay. We don't go around. Anyone else? All right, last chance for Zoomers.
No one.
Okay. All right, folks, that ends the phase, I'll call it phase 3 for lack of a better word. The next phase is fact finding and recommendations, which is the sole area of your zoning board of appeals to handle. I am going to, and by the way, I heard a couple people say, refer to the different nights as different hearings. They are not different hearings. If it was a different hearing, every time you'd have to have a public notice. All the nights are one hearing, and I've referred to them each of the evenings as sessions. So I'm going to recess this session until one week from tonight, the 26th, Wednesday, the 26th, 8 o'clock, could have 7 o'clock here at the old Lee County Courthouse. 7 o'clock, Wednesday, the 26th of August, 7 o'clock. And we are in recess until then.
Judge,
Yes, Pam.
I thought we had it for August 24th on a Monday.
Well, we did, but there needs time for the board to muster their facts and for my work on those. So it can't happen before then, just can't. But thanks. Okay, 26, 7 o'clock.